East has been caged for 7 years for sex attacks throughout Paisley. 28-year-old Callum Monsoon was found guilty at a trial at the High Court in Paisley of crimes against 6 women between 2019 and 2023, which included rape, domestic abuse and sexual assault. Glasgow City Council has unveiled major plans to improve the city centre, with 11 projects set to begin in early 2025. The redevelopment, which is planned to be completed by 2028, aims to transform the look and feel of key streets, which will include Argyle Street, Sauchiehall Street and Clyde Street, as well as George Square and the Bromley Lawn. Scotland's former First Minister, Alex Salmond, was in the best of health before he suddenly collapsed and died on Saturday the 12th of October at the age of 69. The former MP and MSP, who led the country between 2007 and 2014, became ill while attending an international conference in North Macedonia. He was having lunch when at around 3:30 p.m. local time fell into the arms of a fellow delegate after suffering what is thought to have been a heart attack. Sir Keir Starmer has defended the government's plans to overhaul and increase workers' rights as pro-growth. He told a major business summit in the UK he would scrap regulation that holds back investment and would ask regulators to prioritise growth. The government's Employability Rights Bill proposes a number of changes, including to sick pay and parental leave, but some business groups are concerned about how they would work in practice, and there are fears some may put off hiring new staff. And now for African news. A second train crash in recent weeks has left many people injured in Egypt. On the morning of Sunday the 13th of October, a locomotive collided with the rear of a sleeper train en route from Aswan to Cairo, causing 2 train carriages to fall into the Ibrahimiyya Canal in Upper Egypt. At least 20 people were injured and taken to hospital. The carriages not affected are said to have resumed the journey towards the Egyptian capital. And that's the latest from Jambo Newsroom. I'm Andrew Bainey.
Need security? Call Alpha One Plus Limited, a strategic security resourcing platform that connects you with licensed security personnel. We cater for our clients' security needs, from manned guarding, door supervision, event security, all the way up to close personal protection. Alpha One Plus Limited, your one-stop security solution. Call now at 44-074-2526-7909 or send us an email on info@alphaoneplus.com.
Across the World Wide Web, on your mobile devices, on social media platforms. This is Jambo Radio. www.jamboradio.co.uk. We are multilingual. We are conversational in the languages you best understand. We are Jambo Radio. Jambo Radio, inspiring transformation.
Hello and welcome to Touchpoint with Tayo on Jambo Radio, the show where everything matters. I'm your host, Tayo Oweye, and on Touchpoint, we engage Africans' reality. We explore vital issues and vital issues concerning Africans in Africa and Africans in diaspora. We explore and all those issues and educate minds and vital addressing trending issues in our societies. And today on Touchpoint, we started with the Black History Month last week, and we looked at the reimagined man, and this is the continuation of that series. And I have my 2 guests from last week here in the studio. I have Shogbaike Benga, a content marketing professional, and Joshua Luadari Udunowo, customer service consultant. Hello, Benga and Joshua. Joshua is with me in the studio, and Benga is live from England. You're welcome to Touchpoint.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You can join the conversation as usual on Jambo Radio YouTube platform, Facebook, which is Jambo Radio Scotland, and also on X at jamboradio.scot, on Instagram at jamboradio.scotland, and you can email us info@jamboradio.co.uk. Send us a comment, your questions about the reimagined man, and we go right into our discussion today. I will start with Joshua. Joshua, last week we talked about man generally in terms of political landscape, but I want us to zoom in on the reimagined man in terms of the Africa landscape and perspective. So, what does it mean to be an African man in diaspora?
Okay, thank you very much, and it's good to be back again today. So, basically, for me, I believe being an African man or an African in diaspora means navigating a dual identity, trying to maintain connection to your cultural roots, and also adapting a new culture. That's what it means to be an African man in the diaspora. You find yourself, there's a toggle between two different cultures and trying to blend in. And as Africans in the diaspora, we face so many challenges, like stereotypes. There are a lot of stereotypes the world have about African men or Africans in general. Cultural stereotype, struggling to adopt a new culture. For me, for example, being an African man from Nigeria, Yoruba man, for example, I still struggle with, Yorubas, we are strong on respect, and our culture is very strong on respect. Practical example, there was a day at work, the head of my department, that's general in the whole of the UK, she came to our Glasgow office. So as I was stepping in, I saw her at the reception. So, my first action was to try to help her carry her bag. And she was looking at me like I was trying to steal from her. And immediately I snapped out of it. It's something you have to do just to show that you respect that person. And sometimes I find myself bowing down to greet some of my superiors at work. So, it's still a struggle, but generally, being an African man in diaspora, like I said earlier, it means trying to blend into different identity.
Binga, what will be your point on this?
I agree with him 100%. I don't know if there's anything I need to add, but it's a balancing act. It's trying to juggle different realities, different expectations at the same time. It's trying to adapt to a different way of life, especially if you were not born here, if you migrated from Africa. It's trying to balance, everything at the same time, and still and function in a society that is not exactly like the one we come from. So it's dealing with a lot of, maybe not a lot, but dealing with different stereotypes or labels. It's you trying to convince people that you have the capacity, in some sense, to do or to make things happen, right? And again, when you're now a Nigerian, then it comes with additional labels that you need to deal with. So, yeah, it's not bad. Like the way I see it, right? I don't think it's something that should dissuade anybody from trying to maybe migrate if you intend to, or anything. It's life, right? You navigate, the different norms, different expectations, and all that, and just be yourself in the end.
Thank you, Ginga. If one will now bring this up in terms of how can, in quote, do we have that a singular definition of an African man, or there are several perspectives to the definition of an African man?
Well, so first, I think I agree with you that to put everyone in a box and say Africans is quite limiting. It's something you find people do Yeah, right. People want to go to Kenya or Togo. They say I'm going to Africa. Like Africa is a room or or a classroom, something, right? Or you meet someone and you say, I'm Nigerian, and then they ask you if you know somebody that lives in Egypt, and you start wondering, what are you talking about, right? So, yeah, it's. I understand it, yeah. So there's a way that's um there's a way people box everyone into the same stereotypes, into the same culture and all that. And Africa is very diverse.
Yeah,
Perhaps it's the most diverse continent,
I
right?
think.
So a Nigerian man is not exactly the same. In fact, it's very different from maybe a Kenyan or a Togolese or even Ghanaians that we have a lot of similarities with. There are still some differences, right? And again, I would always say that it's one thing to be black, it's another thing to be Nigerian. Being Nigerian also means that you have some experiences that are not exactly the same, or that people from other cultures may not have.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not the same. There are different ways to look at it. We're a very diverse continent. So a Nigerian man's experience is not exactly the same as an Egyptian or say a Moroccan, right? So we have to look at the nuances and not put everybody in the same box.
In the same box, okay. Joshua, how do you think? And now we know that there are several perspectives to being an African man. How do you think this perspective would balance tradition and modernity?
How do I think the various perspectives in Africa will balance
tradition?
Tradition.
We if we want to agree right now that there are several perspectives to being an African man. So how does this African man's perspective balance tradition and modernity? Like you made mention about respect and things like that, but you're bringing that is tradition. How do you balance it with the modern, or with the place in which you are right now, that respect means a different action entirely than you taking someone's bag or anything like that? How do you balance that?
I just think you just have to integrate the culture where you are in, first off, with your culture. So being an African man in the diaspora, you have to understand first your African tradition, as well as understanding the tradition of where you are. There's a popular saying, when you're in Rome, you behave like the Romans. Not forgetting or neglecting your culture generally, but just trying to be, will I say, diverse, in quotes. So just trying to explore other culture, but having your African culture as the core. For example, as an African man, I didn't see my father, many African fathers of the older generation, I didn't see them stay at home to change diaper and do all of those little things. But being here in the UK, as a dad myself, I have to do that because I have to support my wife in my own little way. So still understanding that as an African man, there is this cultural belief that you're the head, you're the sole head of your family, but still trying to understand that at the core of everything, you have to be able to shaping yourself to the culture and the reality of the society you find yourself, basically.
So I think that is bringing me to the issue of masculinity.
Yeah.
In terms of, how do you think our African cultural heritage shape contemporary African masculinity? If you start off from there, Joshua, then Benga can just comment.
How do I think our African
cultural heritage shape the contemporary African masculinity?
I still think there's still a struggle between the contemporary masculinity and the African cultural heritage. There's a struggle. Like the example I made, you still struggle to balance, because I'm sure if you have people from older generation see the sort of fathers we have now, the sort of African fathers we have, is strange. But you have to understand that it takes two to tango. You have to be there to support your partner,
Yeah.
it should not be solely a woman's responsibility to be there for the child. You have to also support. I mean, at the end of the day, the woman is also a human. She'll be drained out. So your little support, but
Does matter a
still,
lot.
you are still the African man. You still act like an African man. You still imbibe your African culture in your family.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Binga, you want to touch point on that?
Yeah, I think it's quite simple. It might seem like there's a clash between what we call the African masculinity, which is, let's be honest, it's quite old. It's outdated. Many of those practices are quite outdated, and I think they should never have even they should never have even existed or
Yeah.
happened in the first place, because your wife is, and I'm using the example of a married man or a married man and his wife. Your wife is not your maid. Your wife is your wife. So the least you can do is to be human. I believe if we treat everybody the same way we want to be treated, we're not going to be having issues
we'll
of,
have a better
I'm an African man. No. I will not let any man. In fact, hopefully I will have a daughter in future. If you come to my house and see that rubbish of, I'm an African man, this is how I do things, I'm going to kick you out of the house. Yeah, the same as the woman. Yes, you must treat each other with respect and as equal. Of course, we are not exactly the same in the way we are built as human beings, in the biology, in the physiology, or whatever. Right? But we are humans. We need to treat each other with respect, and I think that's the only way we can have a society that works. Right? It's just being human and treating each other with respect. That's it. Your culture itself is a way of life, and culture is not static, right? Culture moves, culture is dynamic, right? So you can't just stick to something that that was okay 50 years, 100, 500 years ago. The world is changing. Now, I'm not saying that we should lose some of those things that make us what we are, but I'm saying that we should be human. If you're human, you will know the compromises that you need to make, and it does not in any way affect your masculinity or your ego or anything, right? It's when we want to draw too much on what some people that died 500 years ago invented that we start having issues. These things worked in their own time. This is a different era. I grew up in a home where my dad, I didn't see him change because I was probably too young. But I saw him, take care of us, bathe us, do all those things. So it's not strange to me. It's not new, right? I grew up also taking care of other people's babies, maybe aunts, uncles, and all that. So there's nothing new about that. Just be human and respect people and treat them the way you want them to treat you. Everybody will be fine.
So there is, the concept of decolonization is coming up and is an ongoing thing. I've had scholars, those who believed in decolonization. I've had those who said it's just time. It's just about time. There was a time that happened. This is our time. What are we now doing? How do you think, in terms of that concept of changing, how do you think African men are redefining their cultural identities in today's world? Joshua?
How do I think the African men are redefining?
Yeah.
I think now we now have more African men who are more emotional. I mean, back in the days, where there's a concept as African men that we are built tough and we have to be tough. You should not show certain emotions. Now you now have more African men being open in relationship. I mean, communicating more, trying to understand the woman's side, as well as, like you said, be human, basically. Because I don't see a concept whereby you have to be Lord generally over someone because she's your wife. So yeah, we now have we now have more African men being open. They communicate more. You try to understand the person you are in a relationship with, and you are human, basically. We are becoming more human, becoming more open, showing more emotions. I mean, crying more if you have to. And
Winga, you have an idea of some of sociological issues and concepts. How do you think systems over time have historically affected or shaped the traditional African concept of masculinity? I mean, in terms of systems, we had colonization, we have slave trade, now we have neo-colonization and every other thing. How has it changed? Or do you think those systems actually affected the shaping of African masculinity? And how does that decolonization looks like today?
Yes, I think it did. From we've gone through different phases and different points in history as Africans, and there's of course some of these things that we've gone through have all culminated in who we are today. Uh, Colonialism, for example, has shaped the psyche of the African man. It is more evident in some parts of Africa than in others. For example, in those parts of Africa where they experienced apartheid, it's quite different from even their disposition, and the way they see things may be a bit different from the way we see things. You look at Black Americans and Africans who have never experienced the kind of things, or who did not experience that this on the scale that the Black Americans did. We are not exactly the same. We have shared experiences, but we cannot fully claim to understand 100%, what a Black American man thinks of his society or thinks of the world. So yes, these experiences have shaped us one way or another. The process of decolonization is us um, trying as much as we can to understand or to go back in history to understand who we were and how we have changed over time, and then try to see how we can, the one of the issues I see with us is that many of us don't even understand, or we don't know who we were. We have no sense of history. We have no knowledge of history. It's almost as if it's been wiped off, right? And if anybody can wipe off your history and tell you the story they want you to believe about yourself, you literally will do whatever it is they want them to do. And I think there is a need for Africans generally, whether we are men or women, to go back and study history, to go back and understand how we came to be what we are today. And it starts not just it's not just it is not a government thing, right? I was lucky to do history when I was in school, thankfully, which is good, and I hope they bring it back. I studied in Ogun State, so I think our syllabus was a bit different from the Lagos State one. But I've also gone ahead to educate myself. Everybody needs to educate themselves. Every man, every woman, you need to educate yourself to understand many of these issues, to understand how these things affect you, right? A lot of time you pick the wrong side if you don't understand history. So that decolonization process will start with education. We need to educate ourselves. We need to educate each other. We need to have forums like this to talk about these issues. It's not about hatred or hating on anybody. What has happened has happened. This is the time to ensure that it does not repeat itself, right? And the only way to not repeat itself is by knowing your history, right? I could give examples of different cultures across the world. I could give examples of the Jews, for example. You can say what you want about them. One thing they've done is to never let anybody forget what they went through, who they are. They dedicate resources to ensuring that part of their history and maybe their entire history is well preserved. We need to do that as Africans as well. We need to preserve our history as Nigerians, as Yoruba, as Igbo, Hausa, whatever ethnic nationality you belong to. You need to protect that history, and that's one good way to decolonize your mind when you have knowledge, real knowledge, truth, so facts, from your own perspective as well, because people tell the truth from their own perspective. What is the truth from the African perspective? What is the truth? That's what you need to figure out. As the Bible says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
I knew we talked about leadership last week, and we zoom in more on Nigeria, but I don't want us to zoom in on Nigeria this time around, so that we don't get axed. You understand? But what role do you think have African men played in leadership in the past? And how are those roles changing in politics, business, and community leadership today? Even for those of us who are in diaspora, what role are the men playing in building communities? Even for those who are in our host countries, to build the host countries as much as we are building our home country, because we are now in between two worlds, where we are staying and where
Yeah.
we came
We
from.
come from.
Yeah, how or what roles do you think African men played in the leadership role in the past, and how are those roles also changing in politics, business, and community leadership today? Joshua, you want to take that?
So for me, the roles African men have played in the past and they are playing now, I think generally the roles African men have played in the past would be one I would describe as not doing enough. Not doing enough in terms of like education, security, generally general basic amenities.
Yeah.
They are not doing enough, or they've not done enough. And even today, many are not doing enough. And we don't have a culture whereby African culture basically whereby we are teaching our youth to know more about themselves, like you said, identity.
Yeah.
I was privileged to understand more about the African identity because for a country like Ghana, they value African history a lot.
Yeah.
For a country like Ghana, so because I had a contact with education in Ghana, so I was privileged to or have more understanding of African history and African identity. So generally, African men in general are not doing enough as they should. They are not doing enough security-wise. They are not doing enough in education. They are not doing enough in promoting good culture and identity in general. So yeah.
Benga, I know this is one of your passion in terms of leadership, politics, business, community leadership. I mean, what do you think, I mean, in terms of African men changing the roles of leadership in ways that challenges, I mean, that challenge patriarchal norms and embrace inclusivity in our society so that we can have a better society? What do you think that role, how do you see that role changing?
I would say it's a mix of it's one of cooperation and conflict. Now the reason why I say that is let's be honest. We can make now African men have always played a very significant role in leadership. You know, whether pre-colonial or even historic times or now, African men are still largely in control of the African continent. Now when you compare them to the African women, it's another conversation when you now compare them to um,
Their
the
counterparts.
imperial tendencies, their counterparts and all that. Yes, but African men have largely they've been in control of the resources, of the institutions, of of power and all that, right? So what I think will lead to more inclusivity in Africa is one cooperation in the sense that we need to, and it's not just women, it's even the youth. The young people in Africa are being denied
Because we have
opportunity.
largely a youthful population.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have a youthful population
that's
that
always
is
been a problem.
powerless.
Yeah,
We
Yeah.
have a youth
so
population
always
that
been a
is
problem.
powerless, not because they don't have any power. Even our numbers, our share numbers is a lot. It means a lot, but it's been deliberately, um,
Handicapped.
put down. Yeah, so that the young people in Africa don't one wrest power from the old, and two control the destiny of their continent. You see many presidents or leaders in Africa who, let's be honest, the future they are building, they won't be a part of it. Many of them are on their way out, right? And then the people that should be building that future are not even included. They are not at the
Included.
table,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you see the minister of youth Now I'm not speaking of any country in particular. Now I'm speaking across, right? That is old. That does not even understand what it means to be young again.
Benga now he's a youth. He's a youth. And no one wants to grow old now. Consider
Yeah,
the.
so if you're supposed to cater to the needs of the young people that you don't even understand, how do you do your job, right? So one is cooperation. We need to. There has to be a deliberate attempt on the part of the men who I'm very sure if you look at all the political, mostly political power and even economic power in Africa, most of it, is concentrated in the hands of men. So one thing I think we need to do is, as men, to bring in other people, other women, young people. We need to bring them in. Now that's the cooperation part. The conflict part is people also need to demand for it. So women need to demand for it. Young people need to demand for it. Like one of our, it's not even one. Quite a number of our politicians have told us point blank, nobody's going to give you power a la carte, and that's true.
Yeah, that's
They're
true.
just being honest. That's
Yeah.
very true. Nobody's just going to hand over power to you, and all that. Young people need to be more active in the matters of their societies.
Right, yeah.
We need to stop being spectators. If as long as we are passive, nobody's going to give us any reins of power, because they themselves, they didn't get on the platter. At least many of them didn't get on the platter, right?
Yeah.
So yes, cooperation on one part, conflict in the sense that young Africans need to demand for it, women need to demand for it. The government or the men can make considerations for them, but
Yeah.
you also need to make demands and work to get what you believe you
Yeah.
deserve.
Okay. So, thank you so much. We will be going on break right now, but remember what my speakers had said today in terms of youth, women, for us to have an inclusive society in Africa, even where we are in our host country. You don't have to be passive, else things will pass over you. We'll go on break right now.
Yeah, it's a pass through by.
They're just jealous of your mind. They're just jealous 'cause you're kind.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned. Still have my guest here in the studio, joining me in the Jambo Radio studio live in Glasgow. And I have Gbenga Shugbaike with me online from England. He's a content marketing professional. And Joshua Oluwadari Odunowo, also here, customer service consultant. And I'll be having a commentator joining us, also from England, very soon. We have a question here from on our YouTube platform, and this is a question to my guests, Gbenga and Joshua. It says, should modernity take away one's cultural values, traditions that are not against your rights, language, and dress culture? What do you have to say to that? Would you like to go, Joshua? Yes.
Like what I always preach.
Yeah.
First off is you have to know yourself to be able to integrate a new or different culture or integrate modernity. You have to have that self-identity. If you are caught to your identity, modernity shouldn't change your dress culture. It can influence your culture. I mean, for example, being an African in the UK, there are certain ways you have to dress because of the weather. So you can't go out with light clothing like you can do in Africa. It doesn't change your African dress sense. It just influences. So it should influence, not change.
Gbenga.
Yeah.
Gbenga. Is Gbenga there?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah, I'm here.
yes, we can hear you. Okay.
Can you see me?
I think you can. Yes, we can see you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I agree. It should influence, not change. Right. The only part of culture that I'm 100% in support of changing is the oppressive part of your culture.
Okay.
Yeah, that should change. You know, your if there's any part of your culture that is oppressive, say to women or to children or to other people, yes, that should change. You see, what is acceptable was acceptable 200, 500, 1,000 years ago may not necessarily work for us now. So that part of it can change with modernity, but there are very important elements. There's some noise in the background, but there are very important elements of your culture that should not change. They can be influenced, but should not change your language, your food, your dressing. You know, different parts of your culture. Those parts are enduring parts of culture that should stay. Right. That's my view on that.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Gbenga, for that. And okay, is my commentator there? Can you just talk?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, guests.
Thank you, Lagwaja.
Thank you so much.
Let me give my commentator a name, Lagwaja. So, Mr. Lagwaja, talk.
All right. Thank you very much to the guests in the house. I think what they've been discussing so far, they are the realities on ground. However, talking about if modernity should affect our culture and tradition, I think, like the first guest said, it shouldn't affect it. It should influence it. I agree totally with that. But we also need to agree on what kind of influence, in what way, and which area. And I could remember as well, the second guest talked about, yes, it's good to influence, especially the areas of our culture that are kind of against human rights, basic rights, women's rights, girls' rights, something like female genital mutilation, for example. Yes, modernity should have influenced such. so that we have that kind no more in Africa. The same thing regarding education. Uh, Children in Africa not going to school. It's not part of African culture. It's not our culture. Something happened along the line, but that's another discussion for another day. Again, we also need to realize that talking about modernity affecting, influencing our culture. Let me give you an area of entertainment. Let me use Nigeria for example. You Nigerians are doing very well when it comes to that. All over the world, irrespective of where anyone comes from, Nigerian music is still superb, respected. They are really loved. I've seen people singing Ashake's music, and they are white people, and they were singing in Yoruba. So this kind of thing. So modernity influenced Ashake's music to go all over the world because of the different different channels in which Ashake
Technology
could,
and everything like
yeah,
that.
technology in short, technology. So these are the areas of influence. The same thing is happening to the entertainment, to the movie industry right now. I mean, from the latest review I did regarding Nigeria, I realized that for especially the Nollywood, they are not going back to bring back the history of Yorubas or some historical events, some historical, that has happened in Yoruba land years ago. They are now putting it into cinematography. So these are different ways in which we can influence the world with our culture and take it out anywhere. And lastly, let me say this regarding any Nigerian or any African abroad. I salute Ghanaians, for examples. Wherever you see Ghanaian leaders, you see them putting on, is it kente or something?
Yeah, Kente.
There's this top they usually put on. And the same thing even with Nigerians, especially those from in fact, any Nigerian who is in position of leadership, you hardly see them going abroad and putting on suit. They put on their local or traditional costume, which is great. This is what we should be doing as Africans. I mean, to make sure we project African culture, tradition, and even values. Let someone see you who is from Africa. Let them meet you elsewhere. If you're living abroad and ask, excuse me, where are you from? When they ask you where you're from, it's because of either the way you dress or your mannerism, or there's a values they've seen in you that they are really fascinated with. So these are the ways we can project it. And I also like one of the guests said something like, it's not just about leaders. It's about everyone who is an African. Once you're an African, you are the brand of that continent wherever you go. It's not about leaders. It's about what you do as an African. It's about what you project as an African. And it's about who you are and what you are as an African.
I mean, just like yesterday, I was at a private viewing of an art exhibition of a scholar, Evelyn Nicodemus, and it was basically African art, wonderful African art that talks about the story of women in the society, giving them a voice. And that is a way, I think that's just one of the ways that we can project our work out there. We can project our identities out there, even though the world is changing and technology is, we make use of this technology and still project those identities that we have. Because if you forget your identity, then who are you? We tend to just lose that, but still stay on Mr. Lagbaja on as we go. I want us to touch point on African father and husband. How are the modern African men reimagining fatherhood and husbandhood? How do you think they can balance traditional family roles and new expectations of emotional support, especially emotional support for their spouses and shared responsibilities? Can we delve into, I mean, those who are in the diaspora? Because the system is quite different from what you have in Africa and what you have in the diaspora. I mean, I don't know whether Gwenga wants to start off with that or Chisha wants to start off with it. Gwenga.
Do you want to go first? Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, Joshua.
Okay. Sorry, what's the question again?
So is that how
African
are
fathers and
modern African
husband,
fathers reimagining? How are they reimagining fatherhood and husbandhood?
Okay, so like I said earlier, I think somehow I've touched on this briefly. So, like I said, I think African men now in diaspora, or generally modern African men, they are embracing more emotional openness and communication. Like I said, we are communicating more. We are showing more emotions. We are supporting partners. I mean, African men are supporting their partners career-wise. Holding down the home front is no longer a woman's thing now. I mean, you can't expect a woman who has gone for a 12-hour shift to come back and make you dinner. I mean, you should try and support your own little way. So I think African men are being more human. I'll borrow his word. We are being more human. We are supporting more emotionally, and we're communicating more, basically.
Yeah, we're actually carrying out a study on how men are actually managing the home right now. As I mean, for men who are also out of Africa, how they're managing their homes right now. But I would like to ask, what challenges do African men face in maintaining cultural traditions while adapting to this global shift? I mean, Genga, you can, before Mr. Lagwaja comes into that.
Well, the world is changing, and the demands that the world makes of men is also changing. It's no longer. I think one thing that has really helped, or that will help many people, is to understand that when we look at it from the context of a marriage or a home, right, it is to understand that the relationship between a man and his wife is not that of a master and servant. It's the dynamics are not what many thought of it, in those old days, in in very old days. It's different, and I think this is what it should be. It's to understand that it's a partnership. It's not a master and lord relationship. It's two people coming together to work together to make sure they live the kind of life they want to live, right? So if you approach it from that sense, I'm not sure I'm still on the question. Maybe if you can repeat that. Hope I'm not digressed.
You're still there. I mean, we're looking at what challenges do men face in terms of adapting global shifts to their traditional cultural tradition in terms of gender roles.
Yeah. So, like I've said, culture is not static. Culture is dynamic. Culture needs to take into consideration the times that we live in. Like my friend said, you especially if you live abroad, say you're a diaspora and you live abroad, and both of you have to work. You have to understand that for that marriage to work, you need to make concessions, and this is for the very African man kind of people. I don't believe I'm one of those. I'm not very conservative. I am conservative, but not very conservative. Right. So it's important that we understand that times have changed, things are changing, and what we need to do is to make room for the changes that are happening, without necessarily losing the core of who we are. Right. There's still room for respect. There's still room for decency. There's
kind of the respect that
not that kind of
Joshua's giving.
No, like I said, respect goes both ways. Right?
To carry the bag of your boss or something like that around here.
Yeah, there's so for that, like you said, we just have to adapt to the culture that we to a white person. You trying to carry their bag, especially if we are not of the same color, may look funny. Because we look like, what are you trying to do? But you see, even to other black people that are not Nigerians,
yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
it's trained
it's
to
true.
them.
Yeah,
So
very
when
strange.
the way I do it is I treat people based on who they are. So to the white person, I treat them or I relate with them based on how I understand their culture.
To be.
When I see a Yoruba, it does not matter how old I am. It does not matter how rich I become in my life. When I see an elderly person, especially when they are Nigerian or Yoruba, I still bow.
Wow.
You can't go to a king's palace and say because you are modernized, you are going to stand Aya Yoruba. It's not possible, right? So it's a careful balance of both modernity or modernization and sticking to the core of your cultural values that I think will make everybody live, peacefully, if I can use that word.
Yeah. As we wrap up, there is a question that's actually just on my mind, and which is about the impact of migration, globalization, and cross-cultural exchange. How does it affect the evolving definition of African manhood? I don't know if Mr. Daweja wants to, because from what he has been discussing, I think it delve into it. How do you think migration, globalization, and cross-cultural exchange had actually had impact on the evolving definition of African manhood?
All right. Thank you very much, Tayo. I think in the first instance, the world is a global village. I did not start today. It didn't even start when the United Nations MDG started. It did not start even when they evolved into SDGs. No. The world has everly been a global village. If you move from your state, for example, in Nigeria, if you move from Sokoto State to Lagos State, you are still moving from your place to a place unknown. So it's still the same thing moving from Ghana, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe or Egypt or wherever to the UK or to the US. It's still the same thing. You are still moving. So this is still part of the global village we're talking about. And the way it has really helped within the family is the fact that you are learning, you are relearning, and you are unlearning whatever you had, wherever you're coming from. So it has really helped to shape a lot of things. I'm very sure even right here in the UK, where you are there, I'm very sure you might have seen a lot of African men carrying babies during the day on the street. And this is
Yeah.
something most of them are not used to wherever they're coming from. But because the world is a global village, they don't have an option when their wife have gone to work or for something else, they have to take care of the children. So the world is really evolving and it's shaping the way men are taking care of their husband. You see, most of the issues, of their wives, most of the issues we have within the home abroad for African men is because, or let me say, it happens only among African men who are not so close with their wives before going abroad, who do not have very good relationship with their wives. So when they go abroad, the reality setting, and when the reality setting, it affects them because they have never been supportive of their spouse even before moving abroad. But this global movement has really helped to make things better. And African men are thinking wider globally. Why they act locally, they are thinking globally to make sure family is first. And this is one of the best way going abroad has really helped African men because it makes African men to think more of their family than themselves.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Agwaja. So in the remaining few minutes that we have, about 4 minutes that we have, can we just quickly look at how do you balance cultural tradition with the demand of modern business and work practices in a globalized economy for African men? Benga. Well, Benga.
Okay, I've muted myself again. Please repeat the question.
Okay, I said, how do you think we can balance our cultural traditions with the demands of modern business and work practices in a globalized economy? the kind of workplace that we have in Africa, and when you come around here, it's quite different. So how do you think we can balance our cultural traditions? I mean, like Joshua made mention, the concept of respect from Africa, especially from Nigeria, or you are probably from the Southwest, is quite different. Even from Southeast, North, Egypt, South Africa, they're quite different, but still respect in terms of. So how do you think we can balance that with the demand of modern business and workplace practices in a globalized economy? That's where we're going to hang it for. I just want you to just give me your point on that.
Again, just be fluid. Be fluid. When you get to Rome, you behave like the Romans. You still retain the core part of who you are, but you need to be fluid enough to. You need to be like water. Now, not in the sense that you need to completely lose yourself, but you need to, because you live with human beings. You have to deal with human beings the way the culture of that society prescribes, right? So the way respect is, so the way we even express our respect for people in Southwest is very different from other parts, like you mentioned. So when you get to those parts, just understand the culture, which is why it is important that when you move to a new place, or when you or even if you move from one company to another, you need to understand what is the prevailing culture in that context, and then make the necessary modifications that you need to make so that you can fit in within that culture. But there are times when you will never fit in within the culture, but when you get to that point, you will always know, and then you can always move to somewhere else.
Okay. So in terms of wrapping up, I will give our speakers just 30 seconds each to talk on how African men needs to prepare the next generation to embrace a more inclusive, balanced vision of masculinity that values emotional expression. How do you think we can do that? Let me start from Lagbaja, then Benga, then Joshua will wrap it up.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll round up by saying just 2 words. By saying just 2 words: be supportive as an African man. Be supportive of your wife, and think globally. When you think globally, you know that you're not restricting yourself within the context of where you're coming from. So think globally and be supportive of your wife.
Okay, Benga.
For me, it's education. Educate yourself, because you can't give what you don't have. Educate yourself, then educate the future generation. Educate your kids. And I'm thankful that the fathers of our generation are we're a bit different from from our parents. And I don't blame our parents or anything. It's what they also know. So we'll continue to improve. It's like a newer version of every of the products. We'll continue to improve on ourselves.
Okay. Josh?
I'll just say be flexible. Like he said, you need to be able to learn, relearn, and unlearn. You just need to be flexible so that you can move with the society you have.
Thank you so much. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Bingan. Thank you, Mr. Lagwaja, for joining us today. Thanks, the professional crew, the backroom team, researchers who are busy reeling out these questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this week. And remember, life's journey unfolds uniquely. Run your race to attract grace, for it is only within the race that grace can find its expression. Until next week, have a good night.
But I know, 'cause I feel your rhythm echo. Try and go.
Wow. This is much more.